Live from Music Row in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Hope for the Caregiver, the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. How do we do that? Volume. That's the key. We do that by drawing on a lifetime of wisdom to offer a lifeline to fellow caregivers who are struggling, who are really finding themselves in difficult situations, and we want to help them be able to navigate through this without losing their mind, if possible, and regaining their mind if they do lose it, which I have experience in both of those areas. And we're thrilled to have you with us. If you want to be on the show, the number to call is 877-655-6755. Big shout out to all the folks in Dallas at Salem Radio Network, who is the Salem syndicates the show. And Ed over there answers our calls. And Ed, thank you for doing such a great job, being a great call answerer, a warm and soothing voice to folks who are calling in. And speaking of warm and soothing voices, we have firmly ensconced behind the glass where there's a tour group that comes through and looks at him, but we tell them not to tap on the glass. He is the Baron of the Board, the Sultan of Sound, the Earl of Engineering, the man who put the word care into Karen Carpenter's music. He is John Butler, the Count of Mighty Disco.
I absolutely love Karen Carpenter.
And why shouldn't you?
Oh, man. And also, they put those signs up on the glass because I'm easily startled. And So are the tourists. Exactly. This is not a good thing.
So are the tourists.
How do you find yourself today, Peter?
With GPS in my car.
I assumed as much. And your razor wit never ceases to...
I'm so sharp. I've been eating razor soup. I'm doing okay. Got a lot going on and excited about it. I want to get to a lot of things today. By the way, if you want to be on the show and you want to call in and talk to Ed and eventually to John and then to me, 877-655-6755. Now, why is that important? 877, write this down, 877-655-6755. And you can also watch the show on Facebook Live at Hope for the Caregiver. We stream it on Facebook Live so you can actually see into the cavernous studios here at 1510 WLAC iHeart Studios on Music Row. And we'd love to have you do that. But why is it important to call in? Well, because caregivers struggle with isolation. It's a big issue that affects every caregiver. 3 I's affect every caregiver: isolation, loss of independence, and loss of identity. This show is all about punching into that isolation and offering a lifeline for you to call. Now, you don't have to call with any kind of great scripted out speech that you want to give or whatever. All I'm asking you to do is not be alone. That's all I'm asking you to do, not be alone. There's no wrong thing that you're going to say, and this is your time as a caregiver. It's your time. And I find that with so many caregivers, I ask them, how are you doing? And it's so difficult for them to stop talking about their loved one and just talk about their own heart. This is the place to do that. And I want to teach you the things I've learned the hard way on how to do it more effectively. And I want to strengthen you and give you that courage and encouragement to keep doing it, because that's the path towards healthiness, is learning how to deal with that. But we've got a lot to go. But if you do call and I'm in the middle of a conversation, we will try to put the brakes on and talk to you as soon as we possibly can. That's kind of our commitment here. John and I talk about this an awful lot, that we don't want to just be a lecturing kind of platform here. That's not what this show is about. This show is about engagement and how to help family caregivers who are feeling so disconnected, so disassociated from life, so lonely, so frustrated. They don't have a place to call. They don't know what it even looks like. Well, we speak fluent caregiver here. Fluent caregiver. So you don't even have to say it well. We'll figure it out. We got fluent caregiver speakers and interpreters standing by. Is it translators or interpreters, John?
I think in this case it would be interpreters.
Okay, I never know.
Yeah.
I never know. All right, in today's Wall Street Journal, big article that's worth reading if you get a chance to go out there and take a look at it. Well, it's actually came out, I think, on the 20th. But it's called The Unprepared. America is running out of family caregivers just when it needs them most. It's an article by Claire Ensbury, and it's worth reading. And it talks about what's happening with the aging population, particularly that they don't have a lot of folks to take care of them. I mean, we're just running out. Families are spread out all over the country, and it brings me to something that we want to drill down on this first segment here, which is you being prepared for what's going to happen. Now, you're probably already in the throes with it. If you're listening to this show on a regular basis, or you're staying with the show for more than 5 minutes, you're probably already into that. But here's the question: is what about you? Are you going to repeat history and have somebody else have to go through all the things that you're going through now with your loved one, and they're going to have to do it now on your behalf 5, 10, 15, 25, 30 years down the road? What's that going to look like? And so in this article, she really makes a case of what's going on across the country, that we don't have enough people that are doing this, and people don't have enough money to necessarily pay for people to do it either. It's very expensive to do it, and so the pressure is coming. This is a slow burn topic that is not making the big headlines yet, but it will. It will, and just stay tuned. If we can ever get the media in this country to stop being outraged over things that really don't affect most Americans. I mean, show of hands, how many of you all really are affected by Stormy Daniels? You know, I mean, I know I'm kind of wading into deep into the pool here, John, I guess. I don't know. But, I mean, really, truly, how many people are affected by this and sit around your kitchen table at night going, oh, dear Lord, what are we going to do about Stormy Daniels? I don't know anybody that's doing that. And I'm not so sure I want to be around people that do that. You know, but at the same time, this is what the news cycle just seems to be just consumed with Russia, Russian dressing. I don't know what they're doing, but they're not talking about things that we're sitting around the table as caregivers dealing with. How are we going to pay for this? What are we going to do about this? How is this going to work out? How do I get some rest? How do I keep from losing my mind? These are the issues that we're facing as caregivers. And these are the things that I know from experience and from so many people that I talk to that are struggling with this, and this is what we're going to help with. And if the news media won't do their job,
well, then I guess you'll have to become part of the news media and get a radio show.
I guess I'll have to have a radio show and just do that. So it's if they won't do it, I'm going to do it. And, you know, that's just the way it's going to be. So read this article, take a look at it, and see what's going on. And that brings me to our caregiver tip of the day. Our caregiver tip of the day is brought to you by AARP of Tennessee, aarp.org/TN. And this is, as I read this article, I thought, okay, here's what we can do as caregivers. Make a list. Make a list of all the things that you are doing for someone else, because that's the list of things that people are going to have to do for you.
No.
And do you have a plan in place to cover all those things? I mean, think about all the things that you do as a family caregiver. I mean, think about it. Go through it. Go through what you're buying, all the durable medical equipment, the different types of groceries, the whatever it is you're buying, whatever it is you're having to do. Think about all the things that are happening, all the laundry that goes on, all the cleaning that goes on, all the back and forth transportation that goes on, getting off of work and everything else. All of those things, chances are somebody's going to have to do that very same thing for you. So make a list of all of those tasks, organize it by big headings, if you will, and then let's start developing a plan, you and I, about what's that going to look like to take care of us. Because I think about all the things that I do on Gracie's behalf. And by the way, John, I will tell you this. Yes, we go to a lot of doctors' office in my house.
Yes.
we had usually 1 or 2 a week of doctor visits, and they're not like, hey doc, how am I doing? How you doing? That's okay. 15 minutes, we're out of here. No. These are significant. I mean, Gracie had a procedure this week, and this is pretty much normal. And then she had to get her legs worked on. My wife has 2 prosthetic legs. We had to get that. Sometimes I can take the legs without her.
Right. I was going to say, this is sometimes they're portable, you know.
And so, no, you sleep in, baby. I'll just take your legs to the shop there. Okay. You know, and I've done that. And that's okay, but somebody still got to do it. Somebody still got to go back and forth. And so we have all these things going. But of all the things I do, I swear to you, I was looking last night, I looked at Gracie, I said, I just don't want to clean the kitchen again tonight. You know, You ever get to the point where you just get tired of cleaning the kitchen? I mean, somebody let me know that I'm not the only one. I mean,
no, I can do that for you right now.
I would rather load the dishwasher than unload it.
I would rather wash clothes than fold them.
I iron. Sometimes I do iron.
Yeah,
and I'm a pretty good ironist.
What is it?
Ironitarian?
Iron worker.
Ironitarian. I want to say blacksmith, but no, that's a different kind of iron.
I was going to say, yeah. This would be a whitesmith? No, that's for silver.
Starchinator.
Well, look, we're getting really into really ironic territory.
John, that hurts. That hurts me. Not as a caregiver, as a comedian.
Oh.
But, no, I mean, there's so much domestic activity going on. I mean, laundry and cleaning the kitchen and mopping and so forth and doing that. And sometimes I'm okay, but last night I just looked at Gracie and said, I really just don't want to do this tonight. And she says, I know, baby, I know. But see, she's got this great aunt of hers out in Texas who lives rent-free in my head.
Okay.
And I'm going to mention her on there, Aunt Lila. Aunt Lila, love her, saint of a woman. Well, Aunt Lila drilled into Gracie, who then drilled it into me, that if you clean the kitchen before you go to bed, you always have to clean the kitchen before you go to bed so you wake up and you have a nice clean kitchen the next morning.
This is solid advice.
It is solid advice. There's nothing worse than coming out in the morning and seeing the train wreck that last night's dinner made.
Yeah.
But that's what we do as caregivers. We have so many things that we're doing. Who's going to do it for us? Who's going to do it for us? Do you have a list? Make that list, and then let's start making a plan down the road. So we don't just dump this on somebody else. This ain't like the deficit that our government's leaving to the next generation. Let's see if we can stop that, okay? At least this part of our life as caregivers. Hey, the number is 877-655-6755. This is Hope for the Caregiver. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, For Caregivers, About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades of experience to help you stay strong and healthy as you take care of someone who is not. That is Robert Palmer. It takes every kind of people. That's a great groove there, John. Way to go.
Yeah,
give it up for John Butler, everyone. Hey. Count of Mighty Disco. He is large and in charge. Hey, this is Peter Rosenberger. 877-655-6755. 877-655-6755. We have the best bumper music of any caregiver radio show out there.
Absolutely, and we can prove that. I got a back of an envelope over here with a pen. I mean, it's fantastic. I did the math.
All right, listen, hey, if you want to be on the show, 877-655-6755. This is the nation's #1 show for the family caregiver. And why? Why are we doing this? Why do we have a show for caregivers? Because caregivers struggle with 3 I's. We lose our independence, we become isolated, we lose our identity. This show is helping you as a caregiver stop living in that isolation. I only got a little bit of time each week to do this, but I'm going to maximize it to the best I can so that you are not alone in this. And there is a lifeline to point you, to give you a well-lit path to safety where you can catch your breath, take a knee, and start developing healthier strategies for you as a caregiver in the midst of this thing. We have to look at grim things. We have to deal with harsh things. We have to deal with unpleasant things. Okay, we got that. But we don't have to be grim. We don't have to be harsh. We don't have to be unpleasant. Let me put it in a little different way. My wife is a double amputee, both legs, and she's in pain all the time. But I don't have to be a double amputee to take care of her. I don't have to be in serious orthopedic pain to take care of her. In fact, I could do a better job if I'm not. You understand the correlation now? We don't have to take on the things that our loved ones are dealing with. I hate it for her. but I'm not going to do her any good if I become it for her. You follow me as far as you want to? I mean, you smell what I'm stepping in? All right, listen, we've got to get to a lot of different things here. Oh, by the way, I just got a big round of applause for John on Facebook Live.
Oh, thank you, Facebook Live.
For those following along at Hope for the Caregiver on Facebook Live, that was a big shout out. You got a fan base and a couple of stalkers.
Yeah, well, hey, you know, I'm not going to, you can give out my number or whatever, you know.
1-800-JOHN-BUTLER.
Yeah.
It's
wait a minute.
You could write to John at theinternet.google. Okay, listen, let's get to our today's senior moment.
I don't need your rocking chair.
All right, our today's senior moment brought to you by our dear friends over at Morning Point Senior Living and Memory Care, morningpoint with an E.com. And today's senior moment is engage. Engage. And I've seen this over and over and over with so many people who just kind of disassociate from life, not just as caregivers, but the person we're taking care of. And I was talking to folks at Morning Point before I actually came on the air today, and how all the different activities directors and so forth they have at their centers, how important it is to engage. And I've watched this with all of us. We tend to, when we're dealing with harsh stuff, we just kind of tend to kind of pull into a ball. We almost go into a kind of an emotional fetal position where we just want to shut the outside world out and pull the covers over our head. Yeah, I cannot be the only person in this right now within the sound of my voice who's ever wanted to just pull the covers over your head and just say, I got to stop. I mean, surely I'm not the only one.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
I mean, but the problem is you pull the covers over your head, John, then your feet stick out at the end.
It's terrible.
John's like 6'19".
Yeah, it's forever. I am just legs for days.
Man can hunt geese with a rake.
Oh.
But he is so tall.
How tall is he?
He is so tall. But we do. We want to pull away from things. How does that help us? You know, John Milton wrote this: the first thing that God's eye said that was not good is that man is alone. Now, that was before the fall. Now, think about that. Go back and look at the text. Don't just take my word for it. Go back and look at the text. Before the fall, he said it's not good that man is alone. And yet, when you're dealing with suffering, when you're dealing with loss, when you're dealing with disability, when you're dealing with affliction, when you're dealing with pain and sorrow and all these things that you're dealing with, it isolates us. It pulls us away from things. And caregivers, I've noticed, we can be isolated in a crowded room. We can be isolated on a crowded pew. How many of you all have been to church? I was just talking to somebody this week, so I want to ask some of you all, how many of you all have been to church as a caregiver and just felt so lonely and so alone and so cut off while everybody else is just around having a grand old time? I mean, if you're with the Presbyterians, they're standing there stoically, and that's the way they show excitement.
Watch
and if
it.
you're with the Pentecostals, they're jumping all over the place. But the point is that, you know, everybody's having a grand old time in their way except you. Now, I cannot be the only person that's ever happened to. But if I am, so be it. But you can tell me if it's been you. 877-655-6755. 877-655-6755. For this time, for this hour that we're on this show, you're not alone. And you're never alone anyway. But I'm going to prove that to you, and I'm going to reinforce that to you, and I'm going to reaffirm that to you over and over and over till you believe it, just like somebody has done it for me. What do I have that I haven't received? You think I just made this stuff up? I'm not sitting on some mountaintop dispensing wisdom like a guru. Man, I'm the crash test dummy of caregivers. But I've learned through these things, and I've learned what the presence of God is like in this, that God hasn't abandoned you. This is Hope for the Caregiver, the unswerving conviction that we can live calmer, healthier, and joyful lives, and we're going to keep talking about it. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me. But over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies, and with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
What you've done to me. Never thought I'd fall again so easily. Oh, love, you wouldn't lie to me.
The spectacular Boz Scaggs.
I do want to point out for the people who are not on Facebook Live that you were jamming out lip syncing to this.
I love that song. I love that song. I love Boz Scaggs. Love, look what you've done to me. See, that's the theme song for us
there
as
you go.
caregivers. Hope for the Caregiver. Welcome back to the show for caregivers, about caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. I am Peter Rosenberger, bringing you 3 decades. Not 1, not 2, 3 decades. Into my 4th decade as a caregiver to help give you some things I've learned the hard way. I mean, those of you watching on Facebook Live, look at me. I'm only 30. Look what it did to me.
Well, speaking of, Ed has informed me that was on the Urban Cowboy soundtrack, by the way.
It was, indeed.
Yeah.
John Travolta and Deborah Winger.
Hey, there you go.
See, I know my meaningless trivia. I have this ability to memorize entire episodes of shows and obscure movie stuff, and I haven't figured out a way to make a living at it yet.
And yet, there's so many other things.
So many other things that would be more worthwhile putting in my head. But and by the way, if you want to be on the show, 877-655-6755. That is Ed. John was talking about Ed. Ed's in Dallas at Salem Radio Network, who syndicates this show. We are the nation's only syndicated radio program for the family caregiver. And we are heard literally from Alaska to Miami. And thrilled to have you along with us. Give a big shout out to the folks at the Truth Network all around the country as well that carries this show. And they do such a great job and been such an encouragement to me on this. This show is a mission for me because I didn't have something like this for so long. There was nothing like this. I didn't even have people even understanding how to speak to me in this. And that brings me to a topic I want to weigh into. And for those of you who are listening who are not caregivers, this is specifically for you. Normally I don't address you, but I want to address you here on this particular issue. So for those of you who are caregivers, just take a break for a second and have a cup of coffee or something. Just take a break because I want to talk to those who are not caregivers right now. When we had the shooting in Annapolis a couple of weeks ago, and I watched something happen across the media that it just, I don't know, it just hit me kind of wrong. And everybody was saying, without exception, just everywhere you turn, our thoughts and prayers are with the families and victims. And I thought it ought to be a template on social media. You know, John, it was just like, I mean, that's all they were saying. And they would just gloss over it. In the past, we would put our hands over our mouth in horror. And now we just want to say our thoughts and prayers are with the families and victims. And then we move on. I mean, it's like that's enough.
Well, it's this mantra that we just repeat, and it makes us feel good about, we've demonstrated that we care.
We have dispensed the appropriate compassion, our thoughts and prayers. Well, for those of us who go through horrific circumstances, and I'm not comparing with the shooting and thing. I'm just talking about just in life in general. Those people right there that went through that, they are forever altered by that. And how should they respond to that when somebody says that? Because the questions that come from me when people have said it to me are, what thoughts, what are you praying? You're telling me that you're going to God Almighty, El Shaddai, El Adonai, Jehovah Jireh, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and you're asking him what? And you want me to do what with that information? Now think about what we just said. We're praying for you. Well, what are you asking? Are you going to ask for Gracie's legs to grow back? Are you going to ask for her to be out of pain? What am I to do with this information? And I wrote on our blog at standingwithhope.com a piece about this. It's called A Deeper Consolation. And I've thought about this a lot over a period of time because I've had people come up, and I've used this analogy before. It's like going to the post office, and you're carrying a bunch of boxes, and somebody looks at you and they say, "Brother, you look to be burdened down. I'm going to pray for you." Well, hold the door while you do it. I mean, honestly.
That right there. Hold the door while you do it.
Yeah, you know? I mean, I've got a box in my hand, and you're going to pray for it. Well, thank you. Can you hold the door? You know, I think that's the thing as believers, as people of faith. Can we go deeper? Can we offer more? Can we do something different? I look at what Jesus talked about the Good Samaritan. And go back and look at the text. He didn't say our thoughts and prayers are with the victim. He saw, he noticed, he approached, and he ministered to, got the person to safety, and then provided with some type of sustainable care afterwards. Now, this is, if you got a problem with that, take it up with Jesus, because he's the one that told the story. I'm just relaying the story, the text. I'm just telling you that's what happened. And the inference is this is the model. So how does that apply to what we're talking about? There's tragedy every day in the news. There's tragedy every day around us. We don't have to go looking for it. It's all around us. You can't go off your street without encountering somebody who's going through something. They just may not be telling you something. I looked at I saw the old tape of tape. We don't even use the word tape anymore, John, do we? I saw the old video recreation. What am I supposed to say? Video of it.
Well, I need to know what it was.
I don't know what it was. Anyway, so it was when George W. Bush was on that pile of rubble in 9/11, and the older fireman was there, and he put his arm around him. You remember that?
Yeah.
I've met that guy.
Oh, neat.
When we were in Madison Square Garden in 2004, Gracie opened the second night of the Republican National Convention, and we were downstairs in the green room with that guy. And I was asking him about it. He said, "Well, I really wasn't supposed to be there, I retired, but I grabbed my gear and I went down and did it anyway." So did Steve Buscemi, by the way.
Exactly. Yeah.
And he said, "I'm working," and they said somebody big is coming today, but they didn't tell us who. And all of a sudden, I'm sitting there working, and over the hill, here comes the President of the United States. And he said, "I had nowhere to go," and I just kind of froze there. And he comes up and he puts his arm around me, and he starts talking to the people. And do you remember what he said? When the guys yelled out from a distance, they said, "We can't." He was talking, and they said, "We can't hear you." And he grabbed a bullhorn, and what did he say? He said, "I can hear you. We all hear you." And pretty soon the people that knock these buildings down are going to hear you. Okay? Now, what's the lesson from leadership on that? Because leadership in suffering often means speaking specifically into it and recognizing it for what it is. Sentiment doesn't cost anything. Caring does. We don't have to give sentiment. We have to give action when people are suffering. And that doesn't mean we have to fix it. We can't fix it. It starts with seeing or hearing them. If you go back and look at the story of the Good Samaritan, he saw the man beaten and laying there by the road. Now, the other people saw him too, but they just went away. But this guy saw it and then moved towards it. This is what I'm talking about as caregivers. That we have been the recipient so many times of people who just don't even see it. They don't hear it. They don't listen. Our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the victims. And leave us to kind of just flounder in our own heartache. And I'm saying that as believers, if you want to minister to somebody who is doing this, stop for a moment. Just stop for a moment and look at them and say, if you don't know what to say, here, I'll give you some words. If you don't know what to say, if you're a pastor listening to this right now and you really don't know what to say to people, if you're a counselor and you don't know what to say, if you're just somebody that just wants to be able to better reflect Christ in this, here's some words that will help. Look at them and stop and quietly say these words. I see you. And I see the magnitude of what you're carrying. And I hurt with you. And I'm going to work to make sure that you're not doing this alone. If you do nothing else but say those words, I promise you, caregivers across the country will look at you and big tears will form in their eyes because you will be speaking directly to their heart. That's how you do it. It's not that complicated, but it does cost you something. It costs you engaging from your heart, not doing a template that says our thoughts and prayers are with the families and the victims.
It costs you time and empathy.
It costs you your heart. It does. And it doesn't have to be complicated. Leadership is like that. It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't think about it. But that's leadership in suffering. And sometimes, if you notice, that President Bush was standing in carnage saying these things. And that's what leadership does. We have to stand in carnage and see it for what it is. And hear the hearts of the people who are faced with that carnage, who are cleaning that carnage, who are digging through that carnage. And if we're not willing to do that, then what's our faith all about? What is this whole thing of Christianity all about if we're not willing to do that? Honestly, do we just put on robes and go isolate ourselves from everything else? I don't think that's the whole point of this. You know, and please don't think that you've got to come up with something brilliant. In the Army, sometimes leadership is the guy that remembers where the Jeep is parked. You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Sometimes the person who knows how to get out of the quagmire, the quicksand that we're often in. And I just felt like that some folks out there may find that helpful. 877-655-6755. If that's something that you've been wrestling with and you just don't know what to say, you don't have to show up with a casserole. I know in the South we got it covered when people are going through short-term stuff. You know, wherever two or three are gathered, there's macaroni and cheese. I got that. We know what to do. But sometimes you got to do more than just cook a casserole. And it doesn't mean that you have to, subsidize everybody or anybody for that matter. But what it does mean is that we open our hearts and ask, if you don't know how to do it, ask God to help you to do it, to open your eyes, open your ears, and see what's around you. You do not have to go looking for sorrow and tragedy. It's all around you. And I know too many people who are pushing a wheelchair while their own hearts are breaking. I know too many people who are dealing with an aging parent that they can't engage with anymore, but they're having to just spend all the time dealing with. A young man I know today was having lunch and had to leave because his father had just made a god-awful mess all over the house and called him and asked him to come take care of him. Kid's in his 20s. How do you minister to a young man like that? How do you let him know that what he's doing is important, that it's honoring God because he's honoring his dad and cleaning up all this mess? And for those of you caregivers, you know what I mean. I don't have to get graphic. How do you strengthen that young man's heart? How do you speak to those frustrating feelings and the anger and the resentment and the tears and the sorrow, all that stuff? How do you speak to that with our thoughts and prayers or with the families and victims? Doesn't that sound trite to you? It sounds trite to me. And if we don't know what to say, we don't have to fill up the space with meaningless words. And as a person of faith, if you don't know what to say, ask for what to say. If any man lacks wisdom, let him ask, James says. Well, just ask. And right now you're getting it. I'm giving you the script. So there's no excuse. And just look at their eyes. Look at their tired eyes. Look at their tired hands. Look at their stooped shoulders. Look at their graying hair. And let them know that you see them, that they are not invisible, that they're not toiling away in obscurity, that they're doing something that has value, that has kingdom value, that touches the very heart of God himself. Can you do that? Would you do that? Would you just be willing to do that for someone? That's how you touch a caregiver's heart. That's how you touch somebody who is suffering. Please don't try to make up words because it's too hard. But sometimes you can just look at them. Just look at them and let them know that you see them. This is Hope for the Caregiver. 877-655-6755. I'm Peter Rosenberger. And I'm on a mission to give a well-lit path to the family caregiver to safety where they can catch their breath and take a knee. I'm on a mission to teach folks a vocabulary of what it looks like to actually minister to someone who is suffering. I'm on a mission to grab as many of my fellow caregivers and let them know that God has not abandoned them. Join me on that mission. Join me on it. HopeForTheCaregiver.com. We got to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or if you signed up for a plan you're not happy with, you still have a choice. MediShare is a healthcare sharing program. Hundreds of thousands of Christians are part of this. It can save you a lot. Typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. You can join MediShare anytime. It's easy to call and look into it. There's no pressure at all. And man, what a difference it can make. 855-25-SHARE. That's 855-25-SHARE.
Have you ever struggled to trust God when lousy things happen to you? I'm Gracie Rosenberger, and in 1983, I experienced a horrific car accident leading to 80 surgeries and both legs amputated. I questioned why God allowed something so brutal to happen to me, but over time, my questions changed, and I discovered courage to trust God. That understanding, along with an appreciation for quality prosthetic limbs, led me to establish Standing with Hope. For more than a dozen years, we've been working with the government of Ghana and West Africa, equipping and training local workers to build and maintain quality prosthetic limbs for their own people. On a regular basis, we purchase and ship equipment and supplies, and with the help of inmates in a Tennessee prison, we also recycle parts from donated limbs. All of this is to point others to Christ, the source of my hope and strength. Please visit standingwithhope.com to learn more and participate in lifting others up. That's standingwithhope.com. I'm Gracie, and I am Standing with Hope.
Welcome back to the show For Caregivers, About Caregivers, hosted by a caregiver. This is Peter Rosenberger, and I am thrilled to have you with us. 877-655-6755. If you want to be a part of the show, we are also on Facebook Live at Hope for the Caregiver on Facebook, and our website is hopeforthecaregiver.com. Our Twitter account is Hope4Caregiver. And what else do I got that's Hope for the Care? Oh, the YouTube channel and the podcast. By the way, I put all this stuff out on the podcast later on, John. Did you know
What else
that?
did you forget?
I forget everything. But I put the show, we'll podcast the show, and it's a free podcast at, this is really easy. You ready? Caregiverpodcast.com. I mean, I can't make it any simpler than that. I guess I could, but I didn't. So that's the best I could do. Caregiverpodcast.com. It's a free podcast. You can sign up for it and get all the back stuff on it and so forth. Oh, by the way, I'm going to Africa here in a couple of weeks with Standing with Hope. Standing with Hope is the presenting sponsor of this show. And it's the ministry Gracie and I founded many, many years ago. When she gave up her legs, we have two programs. It's for the wounded and for those who care for them. And we do prosthetic limbs for amputees. and we are going over there to Ghana to continue this work. And we're taking a team with us. We could use your help in helping sponsor some of these team members at standingwithhope.com. Would you go take a look at it and see standingwithhope.com? Pick one of those folks that you can sponsor and help send them over there, because it is a great work. We do this. We recycle prosthetic limbs. We collect used limbs from all over the country. They go to a local prison in Tennessee run by our friends at Core Civic. And it's an extraordinary faith-based program, one of many that they have there for these inmates who volunteer to do this, and they love doing it. I go over there and spend many times with these folks, and we have a lot of inmates that come and go from the program because it's not a long-term facility. It's several years usually. So there's always newer gentlemen that are doing this, and they love getting to participate, and they strip down each leg that comes in. Sometimes we get arms, and we take all the usable parts, and we send them over to Africa, but they'll help me inventory it and everything else. We take knees, feet, pylons, screws, adapters, connectors, the liners, the socks, shoes. But if you send in a used prosthetic limb and it has a shoe on it, please send the other shoe. I have a whole lot of single shoes out there, and it doesn't really do any good.
Not for your reputation, no.
No.
Like, what is your deal here, man?
You know? I mean, what are you going to do with one shoe? So send the other shoe in, and you can find out more about that at standingwithhope.com and see how you can participate in this. All right, let's recap for today. We had our caregiver tip of the day, which was to make a list. Whatever you're doing, make a list, because somebody's going to have to do it for you. And let's go ahead and figure out what that looks like to go ahead and help stop, the cycle from, everybody's just panicking to keep up. And so if you make a list of all the tasks that are being done that you're doing right now as a caregiver, and that way let's answer those questions before somebody has to do them for you. All right? So whether it's laundry service or transportation or financial care, whatever, there's all kinds of things that we do as a caregiver. Just make a list of the daily activities you're doing and recognize, okay, we got a plan for this. And then our today's senior moment, sponsored by our friends at Morning Point. That's morningpoint.com with an E, point with an E. And that was to engage, to not just let yourself get isolated as a caregiver or your loved one. And it's so important for us to engage. Now, sometimes we just want to be quiet, and I get that. But we don't need to be disassociated from life, from activities, from engagement, because our minds will start withering up. Our souls wither up. So we don't want to do that either, okay? So those are our tips of the day. And the other one was, the last thing we talked about in our last monologue section was a deeper consolation of learning how to speak to the suffering without giving glib stock answers like our thoughts and prayers are with the families and victims. Let's don't do that. Let's give something deeper, something more poignant and specific to them. And you can see that on our blog at standingwithhope.com, and you can share that, read it, share it if you like it, send it to your pastor. Send it to a counselor. Send it to whoever you want to send it to. Read it for yourself. I read my own stuff. I have to, because I got to read from somebody who's had my level of experience, but there's not a lot of people out there doing it. So I listen to my own show, and I read my own book.
Well, and you're not the only one, Peter. We did just have a real late call out from Richmond, Virginia, thanking us for what we do.
I appreciate. Thank you for listening on the Truth Network in Richmond, Virginia, and I am very grateful that you called. Sorry we couldn't squeeze it in at the end, but there's so much more at standingwithhope.com. Hey, you know what? Healthy caregivers make better caregivers. Today's a great day to start being a healthy caregiver. All right? Big shout out to Chris Latham and the band. That song, that's my theme song. Chris and I wrote that. We had a good time doing it. There's a great story behind it. I'll tell it next time, but I got to go. We'll see you next week. This is Standing with Hope. I am Peter Rosenberger, and I will see you next week.